Friends, welcome into another happy hour edition of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You know the spiel. We don't need to be serious. We can have fun. Thanks for joining me. Hope you have a drink of choice ready. I have got the Summer Shandy for today. Let's just quickly talk about the Summer Shandy. No, I am not sponsored by Summer Shandy or Lining Cools. Is Summer Shandy a good beer? No. Is it the perfect summer beer that is like exactly what you want, as refreshing and whatever? Absolutely. It is absolutely amazing. I love it. If you are a brewmaster and are judging me for my summer shandy taste, I get it. You are fine. I know that it's not like, I don't know, quality, whatever, but it's the absolute best. So that is my summer shandy take. But welcome in to Happy Hour. I will happily answer any questions that you guys have related to the Packers training camp this week. Anything from Marcedes Lewis signing with the Bears, whatever you guys want to talk about, I am more than happy to talk about. So make sure to get your questions in. Any super chats will, I promise you, be answered and go to the top of the lists. But I will try to get to as many as I can. I'm not sure exactly how long I'm going to be able to go today, but probably 4:45, 5 o'clock, depending on how many questions we get and how many, how long we want to go for. So, all right, let's talk. I know Minnow, I guess, immediately, posted, I think before I even got in here, Bears signing Lewis figures. It does feel like every single time a free agent that, Packer fans love, that is a former Green Bay Packer goes to another team, it's just like it's the Bears or the Vikings, right? Maybe Jamal Williams to the Lions. Every once in a while, it's a team in the AFC. Obviously, the Jets or Green Bay East, as Matt LaFleur called it the other day, has a lot of former Packers. But man, some of these are always just heartbreaking, and it always just does seem to be an NFC North opponent. And like even Jamal Williams, the Lions, right? It's like, oh, right, that's fine. It's Detroit. We don't have to worry about you. We can still cheer for Jamal Williams on the Lions. But when it's the Bears or the Vikings, it hurts that much more. And especially when it's somebody like Marcedes Lewis, like it just stings. It's the worst. And I love watching Marcedes, and he's such a fun player. And maybe the worst part is like he fits in extremely well with Chicago with a run first team that, even if, Justin Fields is dropping back to pass, it's still a run first team. So man, it fits very well with him. And him and Tunyon and Cole Kmet, who they just gave a big contract to, will probably be their tight end trio for this year. But I wish Marcedes the best of luck, just not as a member of the Chicago Bears and not certainly when they're playing the Packers. But yes, it does always seem to be a NFC North team. And I think we're a little bit used to that by now. All right. Jimmy T, Andy, do you know if any of the Packer reporters will be in Cincinnati? If not, can you recommend a Bengals reporter? I do know, I'm 99% sure that there are going to be multiple Packers reporters. My guess is Schneidman will probably be there. I'm not sure if Wes is going to be there. I'm sure either Wes Hodkiewicz or Mike Spofford, one of the two from Packers.com, if not both, will likely be there. I would assume Domovsky will probably be there. So there will definitely, probably Ryan Wood would be my guess. So I'm sure there will be plenty of Packers people there. I was looking at it again yesterday, and I'm like, man, I should just drive down there. And I was very, very tempted to go to one practice. It's a lot to like just drive down there, get a hotel room, stay the night, drive all the way, or, go to practice for a couple hours and drive all the way back. But I was very, very close to it. Maybe next year, if they have a road practice, I'll try to get to it. But this one, I will not be at, but I'm sure there'll be a host of Packers bloggers or writers, I should say, that'll be there covering the event. All right. I've never felt this informed and prepared for a preseason. Cheers to your work. Thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate that. As I've always talked about in the past, like I love doing this. It is so much fun to me, and it gives me a leg up because obviously I'm a Packer fan. So anything I think is like interesting or that I would find interesting, it's just easy to tweet out and talk about and cover. So I'm just like, I'm awed and amazed always that anyone else's mind is as weird as mine, that they like this stuff as much as I do. But I have a really cool group of people that enjoy this stuff. It's usually pretty hardcore fans, and I could not be more happy about that. So Dan, appreciate you joining along, and I'm glad that you're prepared for the preseason here. All right. How many concerns do you have about Carlson? Great question, Brett. And thanks so much for the chat. Not concerned yet. I mean, let's put it this way. It's concerning when you're a career 75% kicker in college, and then you come to the NFL and your first week of training camp, you are below 60% in a non-small sample. Like of course it's some small sample size, but like you're almost at 30 field goal attempts now, where it's like enough to be like, okay, you're below 60%. That's a problem. I do feel for him a little bit in the fact that he's working with two different long snappers, two different holders. That's a change in routine every single day and how that's going. But at the end of the day, and I talked about this with Mason as well, listen, sometimes the snap's not going to be perfect. Sometimes the hold's not going to be perfect. You're a kicker in the NFL, and it's still your job to find a way to get the kick through the uprights. Now, if it's a 55-yarder and the snap is high and the hold's all messed up and whatever, I get it. There's some level of accident forgiveness. The odd thing with Anders Carlson is the past two live kicking periods, there have been 52 plus yarders that have had high snaps, that have had at least a delayed hold because of the high snap. And he crushed both of them, like probably good from like 70 on both of them. And they were both 50 plus yarders and just absolutely annihilated both of them. So he has the leg. It hasn't even necessarily mattered if the snap has been a little bit off from time to time. And even with making those, and just think if he misses those two, those would have been two more missed field goals. The percentage would have even been worse, but awesome leg. And I'm hoping he gets it together. Not panicked quite yet because it's super freaking early. And these players have different, growth points where they can, it kind of clicks at different points. We'll see what happens through the remainder of training camp and preseason. But if this continues, they're going to have to at least look at trying something different, bringing in some competition, but I'm not concerned yet. And ideally, I would love Carlson to work out and them to give him as much time as possible to work out, just because he is a super huge leg and you'd like to see the accuracy issues work its way out, but it didn't in college. And so far it hasn't been great so far in training camp. All right, Matt, appreciate you, buddy. Matt just sent me tomorrow's podcast, so make sure to check that out. Let's preview what tomorrow's podcast is about from Matt Freilich and Eli Berkovitz. So per Matt Freilich, Eli and Matt discussed the week that was at training camp, Marcedes Lewis signing to Chicago, and an injury update as they preview Packers family night. So that's what you can look forward to from Matt Freilich and Eli Berkovitz tomorrow. I actually finished up a podcast with Sam Monson from PFF, so you can check that out tomorrow as well. We got double duty. We're doing 2-a-days at Pack-A-Day, but definitely check out Matt and Eli tomorrow as well. But Matt, appreciate the chat. Do you believe Gutey's reasoning to not bring back Marcedes Lewis was to preserve snaps for the rookie tight ends? 1,000,000%. Absolutely 1,000,000%. So once you get Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, right, you want to preserve as many snaps as possible. It's the same reason that there's not Sammy Watkins that's trying to snipe snaps from the young rookie wide receivers this year, in my opinion. Like at some point, you want these players to develop. It is a young person's game. And as people who have listened to me talk about the Packers on my podcast on numerous occasions in the past, I'm all about when is that next window going to be open? In all likelihood, and by all odds makers approaches, the Packers are not likely in any way, shape, or form to win a Super Bowl this year. It's not to say they can't. It's not to say crazier things in sports haven't happened. But in all likelihood, they're not winning a Super Bowl this year. In fact, I would argue that the biggest thing that they're trying to do this year is to continue to grow, get better, and develop Jordan Love. That's kind of the goal of their season. So if this season is not about, at least from a GM standpoint, from a GM's mind standpoint, winning a Super Bowl, then it's about figuring out how you can win the next one. And that's by developing younger players and making sure that they're ready for the 2024, 25, 26, 27, whatever that next season is when that Super Bowl window opens. And if that next window is next year, the year beyond, adding a 39-year-old tight end to your roster that's probably only going to play this year is a one-dimensional player who can only run block, as great as he is as a run blocker. And I say this with all reverence to Marcedes Lewis, who I absolutely love. You're not doing yourself any favors in trying to get the snaps that you need for Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, and even guys like Tyler Davis, who's had a nice camp so far, and Josiah DeGuara. I don't know if he's going to end up being a long-term player for them, but you would rather have those guys out on the field and developing in that situation if you're not playing for a Super Bowl this year than rather keeping a 39-year-old one-year tight end where you're just sniping snaps from those younger players. Now, could Marcedes Lewis be beneficial to Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave? Yes, and I've argued just as much. If there were any veteran that I would have brought back this year, it would have been Marcedes Lewis for that exact reason. But here's what happens, right? If you're a GM and you're like, you know what, we'll bring Marcedes Lewis back and we're going to let him mentor these tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave and Tyler Davis, et cetera, and really be sort of a mentor in that room. What happens is Matt LaFleur, when he's coaching the team, it's his job to win on Sundays. It's not Brian's job per se to figure out how to win this Sunday. Brian's long-term, Matt is short-term. Matt's trying to figure out how to win this week. So what do you do when you've got some veterans in the room that are probably a little bit more accustomed to playing every week, that are willing to, that like know the ins and outs of the offense probably a little bit better? When you're trying to win a football game this week, you're like, you know what? I would like to get some snaps for Tucker Kraft, or I'd like to get some more Toure or Jaden Reed in there, but I've got these veterans, like maybe they give me a better chance for this Sunday. So, you know what? I'm going to play Marcedes 30 snaps, and I'm going to play Sammy Watkins 30 snaps. And you end up hurting your ability to develop these rookies because they can't get in the game. So if you're Brian Gutekunst and you're trying to think long-term of like, all right, when are we going to be really good again? We got to get these young players on the field. You're not as, keen to bringing in some of those older veterans that are, like I said, are just going to snipe snaps from your younger players. So I love the fact, in fact, one of my favorite things of this offseason is that they haven't necessarily brought in those guys that are going to steal snaps, especially, and Gutey said it perfectly. Once they drafted Tucker Kraft and once they drafted Luke Musgrave, that was sort of the end of the Marcedes Lewis conversation. It was like, yeah, they probably would have been open to bringing them back if they weren't able to find tight ends in the draft. But when you bring in two in the top 100 picks at that position, and you've already got some guys like Tyler Davis and Josiah DeGuara on the roster, it's probably time to move on and start opening that next window at tight end and for the whole roster. So no, I 1,000,000% believe him. I didn't mean to spend quite as much time on Matt's question there, but I think it, not only do I believe him, I think it's the right move, as much as I hate to say it, because I really love Marcedes. And like I said, if there would have been one veteran I really would have considered, it would have been him. All right. Colin, not sure if training camp would inform this question, but any changes in the overall amount of zone or man? Colin, I'll be totally transparent. I have no idea. I haven't been tracking zone or man on any given play. I have seen them play both. I can tell you that, but so when you're out there, and you guys know me, I'm tweeting like 1 million tweets per minute to try to get you guys as much information as possible. I'm like, quick glance up. All right, what's the state? Like, is there anybody that's in new as a starter? Is there anything? And then I'm like observing the play, and I'm trying to pick up a couple things that I can, get out to you guys to try to give you guys, again, as much information as possible. So I unfortunately don't have all 22 practice tape, and I unfortunately don't have end zone view when I'm watching. I have sideline view, so I can only see so much, as same as the rest of the people on the media side. And I'm just trying to get you guys as much information as possible. So Colin, maybe I'll try to do a little bit better of a job on zone man, but there is so much going on. There's 85-ish players out there practicing, and I'm just trying to get my eyes on as much stuff as I possibly can. Spencer, Andy, love your work. Best, most detailed package coverage on the web. Thanks for all you do, my friend. Oh, sorry, there's not a question, but Spencer, very kind of you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Tyler, I know I answered this question. First of all, thanks again for the chat, Tyler. I see you quite often on the chats and on Twitter and so forth. But I know I answered this a little bit before, but I want to catch the second part of this question. I don't think Mason Crosby's coming back in any capacity. I don't like if Anders Carlson is not the answer. I think they'll try to find another young kicker who has the opportunity to be the answer. And this goes back to the same thing with the Marcedes Lewis question, right? Yes, Mason Crosby might be able to get you through this season and might be able to make some of those field goals that Anders Carlson can't. But at some point, you have to start developing somebody for the future. And again, if you're not expected to win a Super Bowl this year, a 40-year-old kicker on a 1-year deal that's going to potentially harm the development of a younger kicker that could potentially be a long-term answer, I just don't know what the point of that is. And for me, I would rather try to see them go out and get another young kicker. Actually, I think both Minnesota and I know Minnesota for sure. I think in Chicago, both have undrafted free agent kickers where I don't know that either of them are going to make the team. I think it's Andre Semet, I want to say, on Minnesota. And I'm trying to think of Chicago's off the top of my head, but they both have undrafted free agent kickers. And if they don't make it and Anders Carlson doesn't work out, I would go and get one of those guys and see if they could be the answer. So I'm much more likely to want a younger, talented kicker that, could eventually be the answer 2-3 years down the road, and keep churning through those guys until you find the next one. And hopefully, again, that's just Anders Carlson. But if not, I would be not as likely to go to Crosby as I would another young kicker until you ultimately find the right guy. And sometimes it's not the guy you're expecting, right? You drafted Brett Conway in the 3rd round. It ended up being Ryan Longwell. And so it could be some undrafted guy from somewhere that ends up being the guy. And it could be that rather than Anders Carlson, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Del Arose, do you think David Bakhtiari could be traded at the deadline if the Packers have a rough start? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all. I think the first, like a couple things would have to be in play here, right? First is that you feel comfortable with, Zach Tom, Yash Nijman, Caleb Jones, Luke Tenuta, and those guys, where you still want to protect Jordan throughout the course of this season, right? And you don't want to necessarily put him in a situation where all of a sudden it's, Rashid Walker or somebody that you don't have confidence in. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they have, confidence in Rashid. I don't know, but like a underdeveloped tackle that now Jordan can't trust his blind side. And he's now like checking the line of scrimmage every time rather than keeping his eyes downfield. Remember, this season is about Jordan's development as much, if not more, than like the win-loss record on the season. So if you think you can get by at that point, let's say they are, 2-6 or whatever it is at the trade deadline, and things aren't trending in the right direction, and you can get a pretty good return for Bakhtiari, and you feel like some form of Zach Tom, Yash Nijman, Elton Jenkins, Caleb Jones can get by at tackle, and you get a good offer, then yeah, I think it's within the realm of possibility. But I would just rather they be really good and David Bakhtiari can finish his career in Green Bay. But the other part of that, it will be, do they feel like he's part of the equation next year? And if that is the case, if they feel like he is part of the equation, then they're probably less likely to trade him. If they think that they're probably not going to be able to stick with his contract and they need to go in another direction, then more likely he's traded. But like I said, they'd have to feel really confident with the remainder of the tackles on the roster. And hopefully they're just winning at that point and we don't have to cross that bridge. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Tyler, another chat. I saw this. Did Pat O'Donnell get released? No. Miller's wearing 16, but they're just doubling up on the number. So no, Pat O'Donnell's still on the team punting along with Daniel Whelan. All right. Manuel, thanks for the chat. We talk a lot about Joe Barry, but what are your expectations on Adam as a sophomore offensive coordinator? Quick drink. Cheers, everyone. All right. Here's the really tough thing with the Packers offensive coordinator, and specifically in this case, Adam Stenavich, right? It's Matt's offense. So he's the guy that's calling the plays. He's developing the offense, and he has the most say in that room. So it's not to say that Adam isn't important. I'm sure he is very integral in the game planning. I'm sure he's very integral in probably some of the red zone, third down, fourth down stuff. I'm sure he's bringing some great ideas to the table. And I'm sure he's still very, very involved with the offensive line and coaching them and making sure that they're ready for game days. There's almost 0%, way for us to evaluate that in any real way, right? Now, if the offense is bad, you could point to like the entire offensive staff as a whole and say, man, this offensive staff just isn't carrying their weight and they need to find a way to be better. But if it's Matt's offense and he's calling the plays and he's designing the playbook and everything like that, it's kind of a Matt LaFleur thing bigger than an Adam Stenavich thing, right? So I have a lot of respect for Adam Stenavich. I think he's a really good coach. I think his best trait is his ability to put together offensive lines and really coach those guys up. And I know he's still involved in that in some capacity. But as far as an offensive coordinator, it's just almost impossible for us to evaluate it in any real way as to what like he's actually contributing, good, bad, or ugly. Whereas on the flip side, like with Joe Barry, we know it's his defense. He's calling the plays, he's designing it. And that's why his, it's easier to criticize and or praise, hopefully praise this season when things go good, bad, or ugly, right? All right. Prodigal son, is there any truth to what Demovsky said, or is he just exaggerating? I feel like there will definitely be growing pains early on, but we won't be abysmal. So I talked about this a ton on today's podcast. So if you want the full breakdown of that, go out and listen to that on the day 7 training camp report. Like my first 15 minutes of the podcast is breaking down, kind of what Rob said in my own observations and kind of comparing and contrasting the two. But the too long didn't read version is basically, I do think there is a level of truth to what Rob's saying. And I have a ton of respect for Rob's viewpoint on all of this, but I think it's more the offense as a whole. And Matt basically said just as much in his interview with Tom Pelissero. And he's made mention of this in multiple press conferences with the media, is this is not just about Jordan. And we just talked about it. It's basically just about Jordan and developing him this season, but how this offense operates is more than just Jordan. And when you have a bunch of young receivers, a bunch of young tight ends, and some, good offensive linemen and running backs, but a lot of inexperience overall on offense, especially with Jordan at quarterback too, there's going to be a lot of volatility, right? And I think there's going to be some moments where Jordan does everything right, throws a perfect ball like he did in practice to Christian Watson the other day, and Christian just drops it, or Jaden Reed runs the wrong route, or Romeo has a play where him and Jordan just aren't on the same page. And Samori Toure runs it differently than what Jaden Reed ran it. And those are just going to be things that need to be in rhythm. There's going to be other times, like on the first day of training camp, where Luke Musgrave came wide open and Jordan just missed him. Or when Christian Watson came wide open on the left side and Jordan just missed him. There's going to be other times where, the wide receiver does everything right, Jordan's doing everything right, and the offensive line just has a breakdown, whether that's Josh Myers or maybe Zach Tom playing in his second season, and it just ultimately not able to come to fruition because Jordan didn't have the time to throw downfield and pull the trigger. So when you have a young offense like that, there's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of inexperience, and with inexperience comes, sort of those ups and downs. And sometimes it's going to be the receiver, sometimes it's going to be the tight end, sometimes it's going to be the quarterbacks. And that's what I've sort of seen so far at practice is it's on everyone. Everyone just needs to be a little bit better. And I can tell you sitting here today, if Jordan completes a couple of those passes on day one, we're talking more about Luke Musgrave and Christian Watson having great training camps because they got open on the play, and we'd be talking about the explosive plays that they made. Same thing with Samori Toure on that day. If Jaden Reed caught the big play down the sideline that Jordan did, fading away and throwing off his back foot, and if he caught a touchdown in red zone that was a bullet from Jordan, tough contested play, we're probably talking a lot better about Jordan. If I think Christian Watson has 3 drops already in camp, including a big post play the other day, very contested by Rasul Douglas, but one I think Christian could have come down with. If he catches those, we're probably talking about Jordan Love better with his numbers and the big plays that he's making down the field. So it's going to take everyone. I think the offense is behind the defense right now, which is not uncommon for this time of year for all high school football or high school, college and NFL for all the teams around the league. And it's just going to take time for these young players to all come together and really find a rhythm. So definitely a truth to it where he said, like, there's days where if it looks like this every day, it's going to be a very long season. Yeah. If Jordan's completing 50% of his passes and you're having some of these drops and the offense can't beat the defense in any of the 2-minute drills or the red zone periods, then yeah, I agree with Rob. It's probably going to be a long season, right? But I do think it's very early, and I am more confident in Jordan based on what I've seen so far in his decision-making and his processing than I am pessimistic. And we'll see what that ultimately amounts to. If this same offense, right, that we've seen so far in training camp that I've been sort of optimistic about is what we see at the last week of training camp, I'm going to be much more pessimistic about it and probably more towards, kind of Rob's viewpoint on things. But I think it's still early, and I think there's a lot of progress and promise with what we've seen so far at camp. So that's where I'm at with things. All right, MU Golden Eagle, in a hypothetical where we're sellers at the trade deadline, what do you think Preston would go for? All right, let me really quick pull up Preston's contract because that is always a huge aspect of this. Give me 1 second here. All right, so Preston, and even if Green Bay could do this. So Preston in 2023 traded post June 1st. He's going to have a really nice base salary this year. All right, so he's on a gorgeous contract for any team that acquires him. Green Bay takes on $14 million in dead cap next year, probably half of his salary this year at the trade deadline. So about $2-ish million. I don't think Green Bay is going to take on that dead cap hit for next year would be my guess. So that would be a tough sell for the, Packers front office to be able to do that. Just take on that huge dead cap hit. But if they were theoretically going to move on next year anyway and take that dead cap hit anyway next year, it is actually a very nice contract for the team that's acquiring him. So there could be some advantage to a team trading for him. If he was having a really good season, I could see him maybe going for like a 4th rounder. If he's having a very bad season or mediocre season, I could see him maybe going for like a 5th or 6th rounder, but they would at least get something in return. Whereas if they were thinking of cutting him in the offseason and trying to get off that contract eventually, maybe they go in that direction, but probably not super likely, but not maybe impossible. All right. Spencer, thanks for the chat. What's your feel for Jordan Love's leadership ability? He seems very poised, especially in the face of adversity. He is as calm can be in just about any scenario. And that goes back to his time at Utah State. And you saw his whole offense leave going from sophomore year to junior year. And he put that team on his back. And yes, the numbers weren't as good. It was a different offense. It was a different system. All of his top players were basically gone and it didn't go as well. I forget, I think was it Alabama that he played against in his junior year? It was a team for sure that they just had no chance against. Like they were outmatched at every, like all other 10 players on the field were outmatched by the opposing team's defense. Like there was just nothing that was going to work. And he just came back, play after play, drive after drive, as steady as you could possibly be. He handled the Aaron Rodgers situation and laying in wait as well as you could possibly handle it. And he's just kind of the cool as a cucumber type as a quarterback. So I think he has his teammates back. I think he's going to lift them up. I think he's going to be encouraging. I don't think you're going to see some of the Aaron Rodgers eye rolls and yelling out on the field from Jordan. That's just not the style that he is. And I think it's going to be a much more relaxed and calm confidence about Jordan. Now, when adversity strikes, how things go will be interesting, but I really like Jordan's overall demeanor, and I think it's going to be a net positive for Green Bay. Steven, you're concerned about Jordan Love, way too inconsistent. I mean, based on what, I guess would be my question. Like if you're saying it's based off of practice, from what I've seen at practice, the first day was inconsistent. The rest, I didn't mind any of his decision-making. Sometimes things don't open up for you and you've got to either take your check down, try to scramble. Like the first day he missed those 4 throws. And then after that, like I haven't seen him be wildly inaccurate in any way, shape or form at practice. If you're basing it off of his games last year, when he got in, he was very consistent. It just was extremely limited playing time, right? I mean, if you're basing it before that, then yeah, in previous iterations of Jordan Love and in training camp and preseason, he was very inconsistent, but he wasn't ready to be a starter at that point. I think he's developed a lot since then. If you're going back to college, depends, right? As a sophomore, he wasn't inconsistent at all. He was awesome as a sophomore. As a junior, when I mentioned everything was gone, his coach was gone, the offense was different, the players were all gone. Yeah, it didn't work out as well. I don't think that was all on Jordan. So is there some level of inconsistency and some layer of inconsistency there? Yes, at times, but he's a young first-time starting quarterback, and I think we should be a little bit forgiving of that. I know he's not a rookie, and I know that we want immediate gratification from it, but so far, I would not call him "quote unquote" inconsistent. In fact, I think his decision-making and his going through his progressions every day in practice has been extremely consistent. Would I like to see him complete some of those 2-minute drills and get touchdowns, be better in the red zone? Yes. But as I've said, I think that's on the offense as a whole. I don't think that's just at Jordan at this point. And that's not to say he won't be inconsistent in the league. First-time starting quarterbacks often are, but I think it's too early to be concerned or to put that label on him quite yet. All right, Aaron, what do we got here? 2 questions. If you had to guess at this point in time, who fills out the end of the wide receiver room and who are our starting safeties? I am going to say, and this is taking a shot in the dark at the safeties, but just the way Jonathan Owens has been playing so far, and I will tell you flat out, all of these guys have just about as much chance of starting as they do of getting cut because that's how crazy this safety room is. But I'm going to say Jonathan Owens and Darnell Savage for week 1. If I was betting at this time, I think Owens has really come on strong. I think he's made more plays. I think he's been more consistent. I think he's been more communicative. So yeah, could he get cut? Maybe, but could he start? Also, maybe. That's just sort of the state of the safety room. So I'll say Savage and Owens right now at safety, but I think Tavarius Moore and Rudy Ford will definitely have something to say about that before all is said and done. And if you told me it was any of the 2 of those 4, I don't even know that it's much of a difference. Like they're all going to bring different advantages and disadvantages to the team. And it's sort of a pick your poison and what you actually want to put out there. But I'll guess Savage and Owens for week 1 as of right now. If you ask me tomorrow, I might say something totally different. End of the wide receiver room is going to be very interesting. So you've got your top 4. You've got Doubs, Watson, Toure, and Jaden Reed. And then Dontavian Wicks, to me, for sure, is number 5. And then you've got probably 1 spot, maybe 2, depending on how they want to structure the roster, for Grant Dubose, who has not played yet or practiced yet and is definitely behind the 8 ball at this point. Malik Heath and Bo Melton would be my guess. I think those are the ones that are actually in the conversation. Really kind of sneakily like what Bo Melton's done in training camp so far. Malik Heath had an awesome OTA in minicamp. He's not carried that quite over into training camp yet, but he does show the ability, I think, to be a pretty nice possession receiver. And like I said, Dubose is a draft pick, 7th rounder, but very behind the 8 ball for everything. I could see them keeping 2. I could also see them saying, you know what? We're going to cut Heath. We're going to cut Melton and we're going to cut Dubose. And we think we're going to get all of them back in the practice squad. You know what? Even if one of them gets claimed, we can add the other 2 to the practice squad and we'll be all right. So they could go in a variety of different directions, but I'll say definitely Wicks at 5. And if I were to guess today, I'll say Malik Heath as 6, but I think there's a lot of opportunity still for Dubose if he can get back, and for Bo Melton to be in that conversation. Sideline Report, thanks so much for the kind words, man. Like I said last week, just really appreciate you being here all the time. Means a ton. All right, what do we got here? Why the Bears, though, for Marcedes? That hurts so much more than Tunyon. Yeah, I'm with you, man. It sucks. Don't want to see him as a member of the Bears or the Vikings. Anything else would have been totally fine. Oh, Tyler, sorry, I somehow missed this. Is Gutey's job tied to the performance of J-Lo? At the end of the day, probably in some capacity. GMs are smart, though, right? And Gutey's basically already given himself an out with just signing him to the 1-year additional contract, right? So kind of like a pseudo 5th-year option. But if Jordan's bad this year, and again, I don't want to speak that into the ether, and I don't think he's going to be bad, but let's just say Jordan is bad, right? Jordan's bad. You have him for 1 year. You still have him under contract for next year. But if he's bad, this team probably finishes with what? 3, 4, 5 wins at most, maybe? Like, if Jordan is bad, the rest of this team isn't good enough to make up for really bad quarterback play. It's just not in the modern NFL. So you're probably looking at 3, 4, 5 wins. And what does that put you in range for? Another quarterback, right? So Gutey can say, yeah, I drafted Jordan to develop him, but we had, 4 years of, or 3, 4 years of Aaron 3 years of Aaron Rodgers after that. And he had won 2 MVPs in the time. We won 13 games, multiple times during that stretch. And then we tried Jordan for a year. It didn't work out, and we moved on to the next guy, and he's going to give himself some outs in that situation. If he's really, really good, well, then things are going very well for Brian Gutekunst. I think maybe one of the worst things that could happen is that he's a C and the Packers are a C, and he looks okay, but you're kind of wondering is this just going to be a guy that is like the 20th best quarterback every year? And we are sort of in Jeff Fisher 7 and 10, 8 and 9 range every year. That's the worst thing that could happen, right? So a part of me wants to say, give me an A or give me an F for Jordan Love and the Packers this year. Either Jordan's awesome and the Packers are good, or Jordan's really bad and the Packers are really bad. Anything in the middle becomes a little bit more dicey. So we'll see what happens, but Gutey's smart enough to give himself some outs. He already has, and if things don't go well this year, they're probably going to start looking at another quarterback right away next year, and that's going to probably buy him a little bit more time. All right, what else do we got here? All right, so Doubs was the talk of last year's camp, but I haven't heard much from him this year. Is the focus all on the new faces, or has he cooled off a bit? So a couple things. Thanks for the chat, Benty. First of all, he tore up OTAs and mini camps, right? He was the star of that entire, few weeks. So that's a really positive sign. As far as training camp goes, I think he's been fine, but I don't think he's had the standout day yet that we were maybe hoping for, and really carrying over some of the things from OTAs and mini camps. Now, I don't think that's bad. You have to remember, some of these periods are very, very tough. You're doing red zone periods, 2-minute periods. They're very intense, and you're sort of limited in some of the stuff you can do. They haven't done too many, just move the ball periods with the number one offense. And there's only so much that you can do. And like I said, this offense as a whole is sort of a work in progress. So I wouldn't read too much into it yet. And I still think Romeo looks improved from where he was a season ago. What that equates to on Sundays is going to have to sort of wait until Sundays. But I'm overall more optimistic about what Romeo's going to be this year. And I think he and Christian are going to make a very nice 1-2 combo, with Jaden Reed and Samori Toure playing a big part in that as well. So I wouldn't be too concerned as of yet. All right. Ryan, what's your opinion on potentially moving Elton to center and kicking Myers out to guard? So this is something that I've kicked around in the past, but the fact that they haven't done it yet, I think it's probably done for this season right now. Elton can definitely play center. I think they just want to keep him at left guard at this point. And it's not to say that he doesn't have the versatility, but I think right now, if there's a need for versatility, they'd almost rather have Zach Tom be that versatile piece and just keep that left side, David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins. And if there were things that happened where Myers gets hurt and Tom gets hurt and they need a center, could Elton kick inside? Yes, but I don't think it's their primary objective. And right now, I think if there's going to be somebody there at center that's not named Josh Myers, I would expect it to be Zach Tom. Remember when Gutey was asked last year, and kudos to Aaron Nagler for bringing this up, it was, when he was asked what position he thought Zach Tom would be best at, Gutey's initial thought was that it would be center long-term. So I think they'd look at that before they'd look at Elton. I have floated the idea of Myers at guard in the past. I think Myers needs to just go and play football and not think as much. And I think at center, he's really forced to think a little bit more. So I do think a move to guard, if things don't work out at center, could behoove him. But Myers just needs to play better right now. But as of right now, I don't think Elton's moving anywhere. I think he's going to stay at left guard. All right. Prodigal son, I've heard drops have been more prevalent than what we'd like in camp. Do you think this problem gets solved sometime before during the season, or will that be more of a next year thing? It's not anything I'm worried about right now. Jaden Reed has great hands. He had a couple drops. I don't think that's going to continue. Samore has awesome hands. Romeo has awesome hands, and he's caught everything his way. Christian, it's going to be an issue from time to time. There's going to be every single season, I think, a couple just stone hand sort of drops from Christian, and you'll get over it because he's going to also make a million plays. But I'm not too concerned about it thus far. I think it's just part of what's this young offense is sort of going through right now. Soup, thanks so much for the chat, the super chat. Really appreciate that. Do you think the new kickoff rules will affect the Packers' potent kickoff returns and Keyshawn Nixon? It's possible, but I think Keyshawn's not going to be one to call many fair catches, and I think he's going to take out as much as he wants to take out, and I don't know that there's much stopping him. And when you're a first-team All-Pro and you're the best in the business at it, you're going to get a lot of leeway. And I think, too, with a young offense, they're going to want to try to get this offense in as many advantageous positions as possible. And the best way to do that is to get Keyshawn the ball and give him an opportunity to maybe get you to the 40, the 45, or maybe even house it and get some points for you, right? So I don't think it's going to affect people or affect the Keyshawn and the special teams too much, but it will at least be worth keeping an eye on through the course of this season. Thanks again for the super chat. Really appreciate that. All right. Joey, how has Quay looked now that the pads are on? I think Quay's having a really nice training camp, and he's maybe avoided some of the really big plays to be able to get talked about on a day-to-day basis, but he made a really nice diving pass breakup the other day in 2-minute drill against Jordan Love, trying to get a ball over the top of Quay and completed to Christian Watson, and Quay was just having none of it and went full to Dikembe Mutombo and batted that thing away. And he's really, held up at the point of attack in the run game too. There's been some real serious collisions between Quay and AJ Dillon in the running game recently. So that's always fun. I think he showed a greater level of anticipation and a greater level of, embracing contact and physicality. Still want to see what that looks like on Sundays, because there were a lot of ups and downs from Quay a season ago. Coverage is pretty good, but you could tell he was thinking a lot. And it wasn't always just anticipatory. It was like a lot of thinking and just kind of waiting and then moving. I want to see him be a little bit more active, and I want to see him be a bit more physical. So far, so good, but it's not just the pads. I want to see that happen in games. All right, what else do we got here? Brett, do I even sleep during training camp? Thankfully, as most of you know, this is my full-time job now, and I'm doing Packers stuff, all the time. And I don't have another 50-hour job that is also keeping me away from this stuff. So during previous training camps and regular season, like once training camp started until the season was done, it was a lot of 4 and 5 hour nights. And right now is very busy, and there's still some very short sleep nights involved with this as well. But it's a lot better than it was when I was working 50 hours on another job as well. So yes, getting some sleep, but this is a very exciting time, and there's obviously a lot going on and a lot of content to get to. And I wouldn't have it any other way though, Brett, not any other way. Carrie, Andy put of all the new receivers, who do you think might make the team of the 69 that will surprise people? That's an interesting question. So I will say, from a surprise standpoint, Bo Melton's a player that I didn't think Bo was having a great camp necessarily, but and nothing bad, but just nothing had stood out to me. And then he made a couple big plays in team activities where he caught some really nice passes over the middle. But it was the one-on-ones that he had the other day where he really showcased his route running, or at least I was able to see it in a little bit more detail. He's a very good route runner with some very good speed. And he could be a player that starts on the practice squad, works his way up through the season when injuries hit, and all of a sudden, he gets on the field randomly and ends up on in a day where he's got 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown or something. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Fun little player, one that I'm really hoping that can stick around. If not on the 53, then on the 69, and just have some success. But he's definitely one that I think could surprise if he gets some playing time. Malik Heath's another one. And then Dontavian Wicks, I think if he if he finds a way to really get in games where he can be like a primary wide receiver, like he's going to struggle a bit to get active on game days, I think, because I think when you're the number 5 wide receiver, you really have to excel on special teams. And I'm not sure he's necessarily there yet. So it could take some time, but once he gets out there, he's a very fun route runner. And I think could be an interesting piece at wide receiver as well. All right. The finesse kid. Andy, do you think there will be any more key signings, or is the roster pretty much set in your opinion? I think it's pretty much set. Gutey's always looking to, turn the roster and find a piece here or there where he can. I think if there were a couple injuries that, made it so that Green Bay had to find a more veteran player going into the season, I think they'd look into that. Right now, I'm not even going to say it, so I'm not going to put any jinx on them. But I think it's mostly the way that it's going to be. I think he's going to continue to churn the end of the roster. Wouldn't surprise me if at some point they brought in another kicker for some competition. But for the most part, I think you're looking at, even if there was something right, you're probably looking at maybe one signing that would be like a legitimate player that could maybe help them, come the actual season. I would look more for young, inexperienced players that they can look to, add to the practice squad, bottom of the roster, those type of things. More of your Cody Crests than your John Johnson, so to speak. All right. True North Packers fan, are you on the trade Yash and move Zach Tom to right tackle bandwagon? I'm not there quite yet, but I wouldn't. It all depends on what they could get in return, and that's what makes these conversations so hard, right? I think Caleb Jones can be a player that can be that swing tackle for them. I think Bakhtiari is obviously an amazing left tackle. Zach Tom, I think he's going to be a very good right tackle if that's what they want to play him at. The issue is Bakhtiari first, right? His injury issue and not knowing how many games he's going to be able to play in, and just all of that complicates things. Zach Tom would be a player that maybe you'd like to get at center some, which means you need Yash at right tackle. If you're just going to play him at right tackle, great. But then again, anything that happens to Bakhtiari, you still need that depth there. If they feel great about Luke Tenuta, Caleb Jones, or Rasheed Walker, could they do that? Yes. I just doesn't seem very much in Green Bay's DNA to do a move like that. But I wouldn't hate it depending on what they could get in return. And if it's certainly something like round 3, round 4 value, then I'm much more interested. If it's anything below that, I'd just be a hard pass at this point. So Pro HD, I can't wait to see more of Alex McGough. So Pro, I hate to break this to you, but I think you can wait to see more of Alex McGough. He's not been very good so far. In fact, he had a couple plays the other day where I'm just like, I wonder if they're just going to sort of go in a different direction at this point. And this is somebody who likes Alex McGough. And when you get that MVP, like it just, it's going to give him a little bit more confidence. He's done really good in some, or really well in some of the individual drills, but the team stuff has been very iffy. Part of that could just be he's still learning the playbook and getting to know everyone and stuff like that. But he has very clearly, in my opinion, been quarterback 4 so far. And yeah, he's a fun player, but I think you might end up being a little bit disappointed. And listen, he might go into a late preseason game against some backup guys just because he's got that gunslinger mentality and just like chuck things around and have a great preseason performance. That could be the case, but I don't know. Yeah, I like Alex McGough, but he's probably looking at practice squad at best at this point. Manuel, super kind of you, sir. That's very, very nice of you. What's the deal with Stokes? He looked promising. Well, the good news, I don't know. Do you want to say good news or bad news here? The good news is this is not performance related. The bad news is that it's injury related. So there's nothing wrong with Eric other than the fact that he just isn't ready to practice yet. So he is still recovering from his injury from a season ago. And he is going to be a player that once he gets back is going to have to get back in game shape and get back in, learning the nuances of the defense and what they're doing this year. And I would expect him to be corner 4 once he's back healthy, because Rasul's not going anywhere. Jair's not going anywhere as outside corners. Keyshawn's going to get your primary snaps in the slot. Eric does not play the slot. Rasul we saw in the slot last year. That didn't work. You don't want to play Jair primarily in the slot. So I think Eric's going to be corner number 4. And we could look at this a couple different ways, right? Keyshawn's your starting slot. You've got 2 starters on the outside, and Eric is your corner 3 for outside corners. Man, it's just you only have 2 starters at that spot. So I think that's what's ultimately going to happen. But right now, the big thing is that Eric gets back healthy, gets ready to play, and hopefully gets that 4.340 speed back, because that's the other thing that we have to really watch here. Eric's like really high-end play was very dependent upon his 4.340 speed. Go back to that play against Jamar Chase when he played against the Bengals a couple years ago, and he made that great pass breakup, right? Jamar beat him clean off the line and had a couple yards of separation. But then Eric had 4.340 speed, caught up to it, batted away the ball, and it looks like a great play from Eric, right? Against Jamar Chase of all people. But if all of a sudden that 4.340 speed is like 4.540 speed, that changes Eric's game quite a bit. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, is when he is back, is he 4.340 speed still? Is he a step slower? And either way, even if he is 4.340 Eric Stokes, which would be great, he's got to be a bit more of a technician at the position and really learn how to be, learn the ins and outs of being, a master of his craft at corner, learn from Jair and get that down. And if he is a 4.5 guy, even more reason to make sure that he is mastering the art of cornerback, because he's not going to be able to win with that speed anymore if he's not. So that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. Matt, this is a good question. I don't have any more information on it, but for those questioning or wanting to know about it, I guess. So I'm standing at practice the other day, and I see Wallers, who's the Packers PR guy, like go and get Aaron Nagler and bring him down to the other end of the field. And I'm like, what the heck? And I could kind of tell that something was amiss, and that like, then I looked down and there was like this, I think a guy that was kind of getting like questioned a little bit. So apparently this guy who had a fake credential on that got in somehow to the media area, I guess initially maybe said something to the fact that he was with like the Packers, and then they're like, no. And then he was like, oh, actually I'm with Cheesehead TV and Aaron Nagler. However, Cheesehead TV and Aaron Nagler are not credentialed through Cheesehead TV. Aaron's credentialed through another media outlet. Cheesehead TV is not credentialed, so that didn't add up. And then Aaron's there. So Wallers brings Aaron down. It's like, do you know this guy? And I know Aaron, and I know the Cheesehead TV people enough. It was not anyone that Aaron knew. Well, I don't think Aaron knew him by any means. And he certainly was nobody with Cheesehead TV. And you could tell this is just some guy, fan, scout, who knows, that like made up his own. And I could see it from a ways away. It didn't match the one that everyone else was wearing. It kind of looked like an older version of the credential. But it was definitely a fake credential and somebody who had snuck in. The part that I don't totally get, like, he had a camera and stuff. I don't know, maybe it's a New England Patriot scout or something. Who the heck knows? But like, he could have got all of the stuff that he was getting, like from a picture taking standpoint, by like just being with the fans on the other side. Like, I could see like if it was like a practice that was in the Don Hudson Center and like only media was allowed, or one of those, that like maybe you would try to sneak into it, like one of those sort of things. There was not really any advantage to him being there on that side of the field other than what he could have gotten from the other side as a fan. So I don't know what the deal was, but it was certainly funny to witness happen. And like Waller's just like, get out. And then the guy's like just dropped his head and just kind of walked out like he knew, but it was very, very funny. All right, let's see what else we got here. Kruger. How does Van Ness look? He looks young, is what I would say. He's a super talented kid. Like, there's no question about it. He's all 6'5", 275 of pure muscle. He's got great speed, agility, acceleration, power, all of it. When he's with the ones, he gets the pleasure of going against David Bakhtiari a lot, which is not ideal for any player, much less a rookie. And it's just going to be about developing a pass rush plan for him, right? He's held up better at the point of attack in the run game than I expected him to at this point. I'm very, very excited. I think he's going to be a very talented player in this league. If he doesn't succeed, I would be shocked, but it is still very early. Have a little bit of patience, and it's just going to take some time for him to put everything together. But I think he's going to see the field a lot, and you're going to see some of that talent peek out from time to time. Hey, she said TV. I'm looking at you. I actually joked with Wallers. I'm like, just so you know, anytime because I still post the Packet A to Cheesehead TV, and I've got logins and stuff for them still. And obviously I used to write for Cheesehead TV. So I said, anytime I do something wrong, that's the Cheesehead TV part of what I do. So if I do anything wrong whatsoever, I'm with Cheesehead TV. If I do anything right, then I'm with Packer Report. So Cheesehead TV, I'm looking at you all the time. No, it was not Grassi. It was not Big B. It was not anyone that I recognized or noticed. So no, I don't know who it was, but kudos to the chutzpah on them for having the intestinal fortitude to try to pull that off. I give them credit. No question about it. Making your own fake credential, walking in, getting on the sideline, and listen, here's the thing, right? It's not just media. So there's like 200 fans on the sideline of practice every day. So it could be very easy to just get caught in the hustle and bustle of everything. And in a way, like kudos to the Packers for finding him and getting him caught, because I thought that like I would have expected like once he got in that nobody was going to recognize it because there's so many people on that sideline, but they saw it, they figured it out, and they got him out of there. So good job on them too, I guess. All right. Tommy, who do we think is the backup slot corner right now? Is it Savage? So far, it's been Innis Gaines, and I think that's maybe something they're going to have to continue to look at. I'm a big Innis Gaines guy, but he's had a pretty tough camp. The other guy that plays there is Shamar Jean-Charles. You know who else has had a really tough camp? Shamar Jean-Charles. So much so where I'm kind of like, it might be Jonathan Garvin time with Shamar, of just like, we've seen what we need to see, and it might be time to move on. But yeah, I don't know that they necessarily have anyone, and maybe they do go back to Savage at some point in that spot if push were to come to shove and they need something different, if Nixon were to get hurt. But that's a position that I think is a little bit up for grabs, and I don't feel great about anything that I've seen in the slot. From even Nixon has struggled a little bit at times. So that's going to be a position to kind of keep an eye on, and could be something that they maybe do have to try something different. And maybe Darnell does get another look there. But so far, Rasul has not played inside. Savage has not played inside. None of the other safeties have played inside. It's been basically Keyshawn, Innis Gaines, Shamar Jean-Charles. Maybe Corey Ballantyne's got a little bit there as well, but I'd have to think back on that a little bit more. But yeah, definitely something that maybe they could try to upgrade a little bit. All right. Running back Tyler Goodson. Jimmy, thanks so much for the chat. Super, super kind of you as well. Tyler Goodson seems to be having a good camp. Do you know if he has a role on special teams as well? In reference to Gutey's comments about being multi-versatile. Thanks so much. All right. This is what I've been talking about with Tyler for some time now. If you're a frequent viewer of the podcast, is if you needed a running back on this team, Tyler Goodson's your guy. From all those, like, so we're talking here about Patrick Taylor, Emmanuel Wilson, Tyler Goodson, and Lou Nichols, the four that are vying for that number 3 spot. If you needed a running back, if you needed a playmaker, no question, and I mean, it's not even close, it is Tyler Goodson. Tyler Goodson is the 3rd best running back on this team. If you wanted to hand the ball to somebody and get you yardage and make big plays, it is Jones, Dillon, and Tyler Goodson. Period. End of story. All right. The issue is the number 3 running back's job is not to carry the ball. And that might sound like, what do you mean? He's a running back. His job is to carry the ball. But I've been talking about this for some time, and Gutey basically echoed this exact same thing today. LaFleur echoed it, the exact same thing last week. The job to carry the ball in this team is going to be Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. That's it. Like, even if one of them gets hurt, the other one's going to take the vast majority of the load. And if the other one gets hurt, then the other one's going to take the vast majority of the load. You don't necessarily need, especially on your 48-day or 48-man game day roster, you don't need another running back. Like, what are you going to do? Hand it to him like 2 times? And even then you're going to be like, why didn't Aaron Jones get more carries? Why is Tyler Goodson getting carries, right? You want Jones and Dillon carrying the rock. So that means that number 3 running back, if they want to get active on game days, they have to do everything else, starting with defense, which I'm never going to call it that again. It's the stupidest name ever, but special teams. And then if they, can they pass protect is going to be another huge thing. Can they catch the ball out of the backfield? And really, the last thing on the running back's job description for a number 3 running back is actually running the football. So while I think Tyler Goodson is the most talented player of that group, while I think he is the best running back of that group, if you're actually handing him the football, most explosive, biggest playmaker, a lot of times it doesn't come down to that for number 3 running back. And because of that, guys that can pass protect better, like Patrick Taylor, and probably Emmanuel Wilson, who's like 230 pounds and super bulked up, have a better advantage. Same thing with Lou Nichols. Guys who can play special teams. Patrick Taylor would be the leader in the clubhouse there as well. Like, that is going to give him a leg up and give him better opportunity to make the 53 and be active on the 48 game day roster. So that becomes a very difficult conversation and discussion, where you've got Lou Nichols, who's a 7th round pick, power back, can't catch worth a darn, probably not a special teams guy, but he was a 7th round pick. Tyler Goodson, explosive playmaker, super fast, really good running back, can catch the ball in the backfield very well. Pass protection, special teams, basically non-existent, right? And I think that's part of the reason why it's like the more you can do, the better. And why they're trying to get Tyler Goodson some of those Tyler Ervin type reps of like, well, if he can line up a little bit at wide receiver and kind of be that jet motion guy and do some of that stuff, that could be something else he could do. Like, I think they're trying to figure out ways of like, how can we build in more value for Tyler Goodson? Because I think they'd like to keep him, but again, it's just going to be really hard to keep a guy in the 53 who can't get active on the 48 because you're not going to hand him the ball because you have Jones and Dillon, and he can't play special teams, which means he's never active on the 48, which is kind of a waste of a 53-man roster spot then, right? So it's a very difficult, complicated discussion, but Gutey and Matt LaFleur are right on. And I do think he could probably be a little bit of a kick returner. You're not beating out Keyshawn Nixon or probably even Jaden Reed for that spot. I don't think he's a punt returner. He's not a gunner. He's not a up man. He's not, he's not a blocker. So it's just going to be tough for Tyler, but I love the guy and I think he's super talented. And I hope they find a spot for him, but that's the reason why that's a more difficult conversation than just who's the third best running back. All right. Let's see. Probably just a couple more here. Hayden, this is an interesting question, Hayden. So what do I think about the Bears tight end room? And I actually want to go over this in a little bit more, like just a slight detail, because they picked up Yannick Ngakoue, and I want to, like, obviously not a tight end, an edge rusher, and they picked up Marcedes Lewis in the last couple of days, right? So 2 veteran players. I talk all the time about the Green Bay Packers and like, what window are you opening, right? So if you're trying to figure out when you can win that next Super Bowl, like when can you open that window and when can you find the talent that is going to help you win that next Super Bowl? Just like Green Bay, probably not fighting for that Super Bowl spot this year. Certainly Chicago, if not more so, is in that same realm of they're not fighting for a Super Bowl spot. They're just not. So signing 2 players at that age to 1-year deals that are going to take snaps away potentially from Cole Kmet at tight end, that is potentially going to take snaps away from your younger edge rushers, I'm cool with that. And they were in a spot where they actually needed to spend money to get under the salary cap floor. So I understand why you're maybe making some of those moves, specifically with Yannick Ngakoue, and they have a really bad pass rush group. So that's one of those things where those 2 signings are going to make the Bears better against like the Packers in week 1. Like, I liked it better when they didn't have Marcedes Lewis and Yannick Ngakoue. They are now a better football team than they were when they didn't have those guys. But if I were the Bears and I were their GM, and Bears fans can probably again be very thankful that I'm not, what I would have liked to have seen them do, if I again were a Bears fan, and thankfully I am not, I would have liked to see them front load contracts and give money ahead of time to get under that salary cap floor so that players are making less money in the future, specifically some of those younger players. Or I would have liked to have seen you sign, younger players that are, again, super young, that you can sign now and use some of that money, but are going to be on cheaper contracts in year 2 or 3 than sign guys like Yannick Ngakoue and Marcedes Lewis, who are not going to help you in your, next Super Bowl window. And a Bears Super Bowl window is very comical in the first place. So if you are laughing at home while you are enjoying your, summer shandy or whatever you are drinking, I can appreciate that. But let's just say this, the signings like that of Yannick Ngakoue, Marcedes Lewis for a team like that gets you closer to that Jeff Fisher 7 and 10, 8 and 9 stuff, right? And that's exactly where you want the Bears and the Vikings and the Lions to be, is right in that sweet spot, that 8 and 9. That they're kind of a pain to play on Sundays, but they're no threat whatsoever to win a Super Bowl. They're not going to get a first-round pick. That's chef kiss perfect. So I don't mind those signings if you're a Packer fan for the Bears. Does it make them better and a more pain in the ass to play in week 1? Yep. And that's a bummer, but it doesn't make them a better Super Bowl contender. And in fact, I think they could have used the money better to help them in future years where maybe they could have actually been that. So fine signings for Chicago if you're into that sort of thing. All right, BKA, very nice of you. Appreciate that. You should ask a question next time. Any other questions before I get out of here and finish my summer shandy up? I'm going to be out on the town tonight. So if any of you are out in Green Bay, maybe I will see you out. If I do see you, come and say hello for sure. I would love to say hi to you guys. But yeah, Tommy, thanks so much for the kind words. Make sure to like, just so if people weren't able to make the show, shows up on the algorithm on the YouTube channel. So make sure to like the chat. Make sure to subscribe if you have not already subscribed. I know so many of you are, and that means a ton to me. So thank you guys so much. Cheers to your weekend. I hope you guys all have an amazing weekend. I'm going to try to do these just about every Friday if I can. So hopefully I'll see you back next Friday. I might try to do one during the week next week as well, just with practice not being in Green Bay. So I'm going to try to probably do one maybe during the lunch hour or maybe during the night next week. So keep an eye out for that as well. Hope you guys all have an amazing weekend. I'll see you guys soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.